Good afternoon, everyone. So here we are in our last session in the Knowledge Summit. So our session now tackles data availability, data access, and data quality as keys for resilience. Data is super important for the achievement of SDGs, of the Sustainable Development Goals, and it is equally very important for decision making. However, if we have bad data, we will have bad analysis and bad results and bad conclusions. And excuse my language, it will be garbage in, garbage out. So how can we ensure not to have this when dealing with data? How can we ensure data quality? How can we ensure data-driven policy making? What are some good findings we have recently had, especially during the pandemic? What are some data tools available to support resilience, and also how data can build trust, resilience, and limit misinformation. For this, we have with us Emilia Tantar, Dr. Emilia Tantar, who is Chief Data and Artificial Intelligence Officer at Black Swan Lux, Head of Delegation, President of Luxembourg National Mirror Committee Standardization on AI. She's also an awardee of Luxembourg Délégué National en Normalisation in 2021. And she is also an EU Observatory for ICT Standards. She's in the EU Observatory for ICT Standards, WGAI. And she is the co-chair and steering committee member, EU Digital SME Alliance, FGAI. And she is also a good friend of mine. Yes, so this is Dr. Emilia. We also have with us Mr. Donald Farmer, who is principal of Tree Hive Strategy, where they advise on data, analytics, and innovation strategy to clients worldwide. So this is Donald. And we also have with us Dr. Imad Mohammed, Associate Professor of Statistics and Data Analytics at the American University of Beirut. Dr. Mohammed is also a TV host and program creator, and currently has a show that runs on Lebanese on a Lebanese channel, which is called The Researcher. And last but not least, we have with us Dr. Stuart Ritchie, who is a lecturer at the Institute of Psychiatry and Psychology and Neuroscience at King's College London. He is also really interested to improve scientific research, and he has this best-selling book that I love, that it's called Science Fictions, where he exposes science. So this is our panel, and I'm really humbled to be moderating this session. So we'll be starting with Dr. Emilia. Emilia, I need to ask you, data, does it have an intrinsic value in itself, or we always need to transform it into information and then knowledge, and how can that be done? And also, can you please touch upon the EU experience and the EU strategy in supporting resilience?
Thank you for this.
Please.
I have prepared some slides.
Yes.
Maybe we can use that.
Sure.
So I will share with you my perspective. I'm Emilia Tantar, and I will speak about From Data to Knowledge, an EU journey to resilience. It is part of the session 5, which is data availability and access, the key to resilience. My perspective would be that data is everywhere. If I told you I went to Harvard, and then I will tell you I took the 5 o'clock train, is the initial data having the same value? In the initial case, you would consider, I did my studies in Harvard. I have worked with them, but that's a different story. But in the second sentence, you would think, I just did some holiday trip, which is the reality of the context, isn't it? Try to move further.
It's not working.
No. So as mentioned, Yeah, as a statement of purpose, I'm the Chief Data and Artificial Intelligence Officer of Blackstone Lux. We are a spin-off of the University of Luxembourg. And to state the purpose of my intervention, the purpose is to present you documents and to offer you high-level view on aspects within artificial intelligence standardization and EU legislation, following on the legislative frameworks. And I'm compiling a number of public normative documents and articles on AI with a main focus on societal and business-related implications. How can we support society through AI? The presentation, of course, is intended for dissemination only in the context of the Knowledge Summit. Going from the context of data, we have the value of data. Data per se has no value. We can have data from sensors, we can have data from our washing machine, we can have data from everywhere. Does it have any meaning? We were explaining the first example, which was I went to Harvard. And this example, I was presenting you some data, and then I was presenting you a piece of additional information. The passage from data to knowledge is not new. It appears with Thomas Eliot in the 1920s, when in a poem he just emphasized the role of data, information, knowledge, and then he mentioned wisdom in a philosophical way. What I will be talking today is not about philosophical meanings or how we interpret world. I will talk about something more pragmatic, digital data. Data that we're storing in our computers and the process that we are following when we want to use that data in the umbrella term of artificial intelligence. Is it data to knowledge important? As we are taking artificial intelligence and analytics as a supporting tool in decision-making, what is providing is when putting context into those data, you are minimizing risks of your decisions. So the passage of data to knowledge is really important and is supporting us in having better decision-making. And what I'm presenting on the left-hand side, for you, yeah, it's the left-hand side, is how do we model data? In the computers, we can model it using integers, floats, but we can also put some meanings, and there are knowledge graphs, and here you have an example of knowledge graph. How do you put meaning into data? Besides retaining the raw information, you put correlations, and you put the weakness or the strength of that correlation, and that makes it meaningful and representative. Even for a computer, in a simplified way, we are providing digital knowledge, but that knowledge we are building with human knowledge. The meanings and the correlations, they are brought by the humans. If we are going a bit further, this knowledge is based on a continuum. The knowledge that we have, it starts from data, and the data accessibility and availability is a key for maintaining the knowledge relevance. We are creating all the time new experiments in chemistry, in physics. How do we keep ourselves up to date? How do we keep the digital knowledge up to date? This data needs to be annotated, and it needs to be reinforced all the time. So data accessibility and availability to maintain good quality data, useful data, and to transform it in the so important part of the digital knowledge is key. So we need to keep relevance, and we need to keep it continuously. And we have not only a knowledge learning continuum, but we have also, in some cases, when we are applying artificial intelligence, the large umbrella of artificial intelligence, I'm not speaking only about machine learning or any specific technology, we need to keep a learning continuum, both for the models, for the algorithms, as for the knowledge. What we see here is one of the most important worldwide projects in building knowledge and understanding how we define knowledge. We are all educated, and we all passed through different curricula, and we all build our own knowledge. But how can we speak about the same things? And how can we ensure that what we are building as digital knowledge, it reflects all our values? And I do think, and I do believe, that the knowledge index is the quintessential effort which is needed for humanity to have a neutral ground of building relevant education and having a knowledge learning continuum available for all, isn't it? Going further on the technical path, so now we are speaking about knowledge as part of the critical part of the artificial intelligence value chain. I took this example because, as mentioned, I'm the head of delegation and the president of the National Mirror Committee on Artificial Intelligence Standardization. And I'm also the convener of Working Group 2, which is providing the standards for European legislation, in support of European legislation, in CEN and CENELEC, Joint Technical Committee 21. There, with technical experts coming from industry, from big or small industry, I'm a SME, small and medium enterprises representative, we are analyzing what is the path to knowledge. So the red part from the artificial intelligence value chain is what I like to consider as a simplified version of building data to knowledge. So we have data capture, we have data everywhere. Even if we have it stored as historical data from our business, or we have it in our household. Data is everywhere. Then we are cleaning that raw data because every signal can have noises. So all the data that we are capturing in a continuous model, it can be perceived as a signal. So we are denoising the signal, and we are cleansing this raw data. Then we are putting curation. If you are having a close look, all this, they are done by human beings. They are human beings which are in control. At the beginning, they can be any skill set that you can imagine. So data capture is available for all, and they are all involved. Then cleansing of the raw data should be done by the ones that understand that signal that we're treating. Being it data with grades from the past 10 years, that should be a teacher which had access to those grades and which has the knowledge of interpreting that. And then we have the curation, labeling, and standardization. Standardization gives us the access to those data, also to other actors on the market. For example, a teacher would like to share with his colleagues. If he has a standard format, all other colleagues, which are teachers, they could follow what he has as data, and they could potentially use it. Then we have the annotation of raw data for machine learning specific models. And then we have the data scientist, which intervenes, and then we go in the creation of artificial intelligence models. Here we have an example of machine learning model, and I will not go through the entire chain. But knowledge is part of the analytics chain, is the same knowledge which is built for statistics, for analytical purposes, not only for artificial intelligence being predictive, prescriptive, or descriptive. So there is a critical part, but what we need to understand is that the knowledge of the machine is built with humans in the loop. Those humans, they have their own ethics, they have their own values, and their own interests. So they all need to be responsible and take a role and a responsibility in the chain. And this is a complex process, and I admire the knowledge index that you had the courage of building a knowledge index that can serve everyone, and that can further evolve to structured models. Going about data availability and access, we saw that the value chain is quite complex, but everyone is involved. But we saw during the pandemic one important characteristic: data availability, trustworthiness, the quality of the data, and the access. They are not available to all stakeholders the same. In Europe, I'm part of the Digital SME Alliance, which has 45,000 SMEs all over Europe. And I'm chair of the focus group on artificial intelligence, where we are around 200, isn't it? On that context, we observed that small and medium enterprises, they didn't have access during the pandemic to data in order to keep their business relevant, resilient. And they represent, however, more than 90% of companies in Europe. So they are an important part of the economy. And if we are thinking about what are all the stakeholders, they range from public institutions to SMEs to large corporates, and they are all part of the knowledge and AI continuum. So whenever you want to build resilience with data, you need to ensure that every stakeholder has the same access to the same quality data and has the same availability of data when he needs it. Going a little bit on the European example, the European enablers which were foreseen for resilience, when it was observed that data is a strategic pillar, it was treated as such. So Europe introduced a European strategy for data. What does it include? It includes, that was done in 2020, and it includes two layers: Data Governance Act and the Data Act. in the Data Act, it clarifies who can create value from the data. Data is available for everyone, but who can create value in a responsible manner. And there are also the European common data spaces, which are industry-driven and which are to be created in the next years on specific verticals. To conclude on what was learned and what was put in place as enablers in the European context, in the Data Act, there are three main findings that enable all stakeholders to have access and availability of data when it's needed, in times of crisis as in normal times. The first one is business-to-government data sharing for public interest. So businesses, they can share with public institutions for the public interest. Then we have business-to-business data sharing. People are reluctant because they do not have instruments of trust. So what was introduced? It was smart contracts, tools which enable trustworthy data sharing. This is the second tool. And the third one, it will be what are the rights for the regular user, which is using IoT, connected devices, and so on, of non-personal Internet of Things data, which are stemming from professional use. You have your professional phone, what it happens with that data. So these were the three layers. And if I were to conclude what will be the main key takeaways, we have data, and we have the necessity of having the passage from data to knowledge. It's a must, because all analytics systems, they use it as a knowledge. The second one would be data availability and accessibility for all, SMEs included, because they don't have the capacity of building their own relevant data. And the third one is an example. It's how the EU enablers were shaped. What are the tools? And I provided 3 examples of tools which can be used to entrust people and to entrust data to be used by people. Thank you for paying attention and being patient till the end of the speech. That would be all from my side.
Thank you so much, Dr. Amelia. And thank you also for touching on the Global Knowledge Index, which UNDP produces in collaboration with the Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum Knowledge Foundation. So now let's move to Donald. So Donald, we all know that data is an asset. I think we all believe this here in this hall at least. So data is an asset. However, how can we leverage and harness the use of this data, and how can we monetize it? And also, what is the use of data analytics? Please.
Sounds good. Okay. Thank you very much. Yeah, data is an asset. People talk about data. I mean, coming to the UAE, people talk about data being the new oil. And I think it's actually a very good image. Data is not the new gold. You know, oil isn't like gold. Oil is valuable only because you use it. Nobody likes to look at oil. Nobody likes to smell oil. It's good because you use it. And data is the same. Its value is only from its usage. But I say this all the time, that data without analysis is a wasted asset, because it's analysis that makes the data come alive. It's an analysis that enables you to do something with data. And then analysis without action is a wasted effort. Because what's the point of analyzing and getting more insight if you're not going to do something with that insight? So I bring these two things together in every conversation I have about data, that if you're not analyzing it, it's a waste, and if you're not taking action on the analysis, that's also a waste. Edwards Deming, a very famous statistician, said, without data, you're just another person with an opinion. We've all got opinions. If you don't have data to back it up, you're just a person with an opinion. I think I'm immodest. I have my own version of this. With data, you're just another person with an opinion and data. And the data doesn't get rid of your opinion. There's nothing magical about data that suddenly makes you objective. It takes a lot of work to be objective with data. We don't forget about our opinions. We still have our biases. We still have our prejudices. We still have our preferences, even when we have data. Which really brings us to something that Alan Weber said at one time. He said, in the new economy, conversations are the most important form of work. which is a great thing to remember next time you're in the coffee shop or hanging around a water cooler rather than sitting at your desk. You're doing the most important form of work. But what does he mean by that? Well, what he means is in the new economy, the data economy, the difference, what really makes a difference in the world is whether you've got WhatsApp switched on or not. Let's switch that off. What really makes a difference isn't necessarily the data, but the conversations you have about it. I really like this graph. This chart is the price of fish in southern India. And it's the price of fish in markets in southern India before and after cell phones were introduced. And before cell phones were introduced, you can see the price is just crazy. It's everywhere. And as soon as cell phones were introduced, and people can have a conversation with other markets, with other fishermen, with restaurants, with traders, then the price stabilizes. And think of the economy when you couldn't predict what the price was going to be, and the economy afterwards. It actually transforms the whole of the economy, transforms all of society. That's how important conversations are. And what's interesting about this, it's not even the value of the conversation. The conversation is just having the conversation that matters. And that's really important in the world of data because, I hate to say it, but people don't trust data. People really do not trust data. They trust other people. We only trust other people. If you say, I trust this data about COVID that's coming from the government, what you're actually saying is, I trust the people who collected this data. I trust the people who published this data. If you're in business and you say, I trust this data about my sales figures, what you're actually saying is, I trust all the people, right down to the database engineer in Bangalore, right down to the salesperson who recorded their numbers. I trust them as people. Maybe we shouldn't, but we do. We don't trust data. Trusting data is trusting people, and we can't lose that human element. Another really important part about this point about conversation is that when we find an explanation, Michael Lewis has said this, an explanation is where the mind comes to rest. Oh yes, that explains it. I can relax now. I found an explanation. The chart I'm showing is from the 1920s. It's actually people believed that stock prices were related to solar activity. And they did a whole ton of research that showed this correlation. And they didn't even bother to investigate it because once they found a correlation, well, that explains it. Now I can relax. An explanation is when we stop investigating. Oh, now I found an explanation. And the funny thing is, you might stop in one place and somebody else will not be satisfied. They'll keep investigating because their mind has not come to rest at that point. And then some data is extremely accurate and not even very useful. And this is a really important point. I mean, it's a joke, really. But one of the most important things about data is just because it's accurate, just because it's precise, just because it's detailed, doesn't necessarily mean you can make a better decision with it. Sometimes we need to think about the ambiguity in data in order to learn more, not the accuracy of the data. Context and ambiguity and tools and conversation are the key things. We always talk in the world of data about context and tools. We don't talk enough about ambiguity and the conversations we have about data. This is data from the United Nations, from research that was done for the United Nations, and it shows projection of world population from 2015 to 2100. And you can see the top line is the Asian population, and it's green, and that's fine. The rising purple line, that's the African population, and that's rising very rapidly, and the rest of the world is kind of pretty static. But this is not the real data. This is the version that was published in Tech Insider or published by the United Nations. The real data that the researchers worked on is this. And that's very different. Look how ambiguous this data is. And you know what's beautiful about this? I don't even need to explain it to you. You can see the ambiguity in this data just from the visualization. But now you can see that there's a lot of circumstances in which the African population may not be higher than the Asian population, or which the Asian population may still remain relatively high. And not only that, it provides you with context, because this chart takes you all the way back to 1950. And I wonder how many people actually realize that the African population was so much lower than the European population in 1950. European population was almost double the total population of Africa in 1950. And yet, by 2100, it might be the largest population by far. That is fascinating. That's a conversation. That's ambiguity. That's not just giving you a number and saying, trust the data. That's giving you information that we can have a real conversation about. And we can have a conversation because it's ambiguous. The value of data is not in its accuracy and its precision, but in the conversations that it starts. We're all like these Indian fishermen. The more conversations we can have, the more value we will get from it. Data should be a conversation starter, not the end of a conversation. We shouldn't come to rest with our explanation. We should be restless and always looking for a better explanation. And therefore, that's what I'm saying, that data without analysis, if you're not looking into it in this way, it's a waste. And if you do the analysis and you don't take action, why do the analysis? I want us to do more analysis, I want us to have more conversations, and I want us to be excited rather than afraid of ambiguity. And that's really what I would hope that you can bring away from thinking about data in these contexts. And I think with that, we can move on to another conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Donald. I really like the analogy with oil, that you can smell data.
Okay.
And also on the trust, that people don't trust data, they trust people. I'll be having a question on that for the panel later on. So now we move to Dr. Imad. Dr. Imad, I'd like you to, as a presenter as a person in media, but also as an associate professor, I'd like to talk to us about misinformation in media, and also trust in public institutions, but also the power of data in crisis management, and more specifically during the pandemic.
Okay, thank you so much. It's working, my microphone?
Now, yes.
It's working, okay. Hello, everyone. So I feel lucky today. I'm delivering another speech in the same room. I would like to talk about the power of data in management crises. The COVID-19 pandemic had a wide-ranging impact on our societies. So besides its effects on physical health, the closure of many businesses and firms put a burden on many families and individuals. And this causes stress, anxiety, depression, and some mental health disorders that have spread across societies, among societies across all continents. Well, so leaders need to act fast and create effective pandemic responses. But people don't trust easily in their actions, so we need to convince them. There have been a lot of misinformation that were flooding our media and social media, and also conspiracy theories and so on. So how really to make people trust these actions? The answer is it will be through data. So Donald said we don't trust data, we trust people. I will say we trust data, and we should trust the data analysis, actually, that comes from credible people or institutions. So we need that. But however, we have to pay close attention to the quality of data. So it's not enough just to collect data. We can collect anything. Already, Stephanie said what I use always in my class when I explain a lesson about the data. rubbish input will lead to rubbish output. In other words, garbage in, garbage out. And this is why we have to really pay attention to the quality of data. This is why the analysis is heavily actually based on that data. In Lebanon, we did some studies related to COVID-19. One of the studies that has been published recently, it was about health worries, life satisfaction, social well-being concerns, and also the good COVID-19 practices. We collected data online, because during the pandemic, this is the most effective tool. However, it wasn't as like a traditional survey. We used something, it's called iCode, which is a smart test developed by a research institute and a technology provider based in Poland. What does this test? It measures how reluctant people to express their views. So people were given a set of statements, and they need to answer each statement whether yes or no. However, this test can tells you whether their yes or no is strong enough. So to what extent actually their answer is confident. And this is very important, and this can enhance actually the quality of data we collect. I will not talk that much. Maybe I will open the floor for the questions, but I will share with you some results that we got from our study. We found that in Lebanon, men are more worried than women about their health. This might appear conflicting with the literature, as some literature showed that women in general are more anxious. But we have a justification for that. In Lebanon, men in general are considered the household principal financial providers. And this is why, with the close of many businesses due to the pandemic and also to the other crises, in Lebanon now we have multiple crises, not only the COVID-19. So this can justify why they are more worried about their health, because they might lose their insurance coverage, etc., and they support their families if they are sick, whatever, so they cannot provide this support. Another finding here, it was very important regarding to the social well-being concerns. So we found that the pandemic of COVID-19 has dramatically influenced interpersonal relationships and therefore impacting the individual's social well-being. More specifically, we found that young adults and people who live alone exhibit significantly higher social well-being concerns. In terms of COVID-19 practices, or good COVID-19 practices, the odds of having good practices for older were like 3.13 times higher than those or than that of youth. Maybe we need actually to motivate youth more in following like good COVID-19 practices. So what we can get from this study, what is actually the contribution, or how can we move to action? As Donald said, if we analyze the data but we do not make an action, it's like a waste of time, right? So we need actually to act. And the findings of our study could pave the way for a well-coordinated national strategy and increased collaboration with public health professionals to mitigate the pandemic's adverse effects on mental health in the long term. So I was very brief, and I think this is what I have to say today, and I'm open to any question. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ahmad. I like the part, like the thing you have used for to study how fast people responded.
Yeah, the I-code.
Yes.
Yeah, actually, it's the I-code. It's like a simple alternative to the implicit association test, IAT, which is widely used in psychology. So maybe Stuart knows about it more than me.
Well, it's we'll move on to the next thing, and we can bring it back because I can
right.
link it back. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Dr. Stewart, during the pandemic and in recent years, data has become more and more accessible. So now data is more and more open. However, with data being that accessible, scientific research, like we have had in it more fraud cases, and I know that you are interested in exposing fraud. So it would be interesting if you could tell us some findings or some data fraud that you have.
Yeah. Well, this isn't one that I've exposed myself, but it's relevant because you mentioned the implicit association test, which is based at Harvard University, and you also mentioned Harvard at the start of your talk. I think there's a horror story from the pandemic. One of the worst examples, I think, of fraud during the pandemic occurred in. I think it was May 2020. So this was about the drug hydroxychloroquine, which was proposed as a cure in many cases for COVID. There was a big movement of people who were obsessed with hydroxychloroquine. And then a study came out by Harvard University, published in The Lancet, so one of the top medical journals in the world. There was also another study that came out at the same time by the same authors in the New England Journal of Medicine, which is the top medical journal in the world. So we're talking about, trusted institutions, trusted journals, published in the standard way that we publish science and so on. This said that hydroxychloroquine was actually dangerous, that actually taking hydroxychloroquine would result in more deaths of patients than not. And it turned out it was fake, right? It turned out that the data were completely fake. They'd been supplied by this organization called Surgisphere. It was a company who had been in touch with the Harvard scientists, given them the data, and said, oh, you don't need to do the analysis. Actually, I say given them the data, but they didn't give them the data. They just gave them the results, right? Mm-hmm. They had done all the analyses, and the Harvard scientists said, looks good. We'll publish that, and they sent it off, and it got published, and it created headlines all over the world. People stopped trials of hydroxychloroquine. This was a big deal because of this. And of course, the data were not real. Journalists found lots of weird inconsistencies in some of the results in the papers. Like, for instance, it claimed that more people had died in the trial in Australia than had died in the whole of Australia from COVID, from all in the entire country. So there was something wrong, something inconsistent. And it turned out that there were loads of problems like that in the data. Also, I mean, the effects of hydroxychloroquine were dramatic in this study. And they had to retract the papers 2 weeks after they were published. So, at least that was one example of the system kind of working rapidly. But how did we get into this situation in the first place? And I would argue that the main reason we got into the situation is the problem of trust, right? We trust each other a little bit too much. When, particularly in this case, we were in a scary pandemic, we wanted to work out what works, what makes things worse, and so on. And we trusted, or the Harvard scientists trusted, the data that they were given by this Surgisphere company. They never at any point opened up the data set, just had a look through it, just checked out to see if it made sense, to see if it was realistic. If they had done that, I think, and if they had applied proper skepticism to the data set, they would have realized. So I think it's kind of just to add an extra sort of caution or nuance or whatever into this discussion about data, is it's not necessarily just that data will answer our questions, and it's not even that trusted institutions will answer our questions. It's that we really need to be skeptical of everyone all the time. I mean, the Royal Society in the UK, the organization that supports science and so on, it's the oldest scientific organization in the world, has its Latin motto, it's nullius in verba, which is take nobody's word for it, right? And that's meant to be what science is all about. don't take anyone's word for it. And perhaps we shouldn't take anyone's data for it either until they've shown us the data, they've shown us how their analysis follows from the data, and then how any actions that they want to take are implied from that. So perhaps we should all, and it sounds a bit of a depressing thing to say, but perhaps we should all be trusting each other just a little bit less. That's maybe my discussion point for the day. Thanks.
Thank you, Stuart. I'm really actually interested to know what shook your faith in science.
Say again.
What shook your faith in science?
I think just knowing about all these stories. I think once people know about how scientific data comes about, i.e., they know that there's a peer review process where literally just two people look at the paper.
Yeah.
It's very rare that people will actually, that peer reviewers will actually see the data for a paper, right? They see the results in a table.
Yeah.
They see the nice graphs. And sometimes they might be like the first graph that Donald showed, which is actually only a partial part of the full data set, and doesn't show the ambiguities and the uncertainties. No. And so they can't see it. So, can we really trust that peer review works if the peer reviewers are not actually seeing the data? They're not spending all their time analyzing it. They're in a rush themselves trying to get through stuff. So I think we, even when something has been through all the checks and the system and the peer review and all that, we still need to be skeptical at the other end. And it does go back to the garbage in, garbage out thing, where there are a lot of cases where, it looks like a study, it looks like it's answered a question, but actually the data were never very good to begin with. They were analyzed, maybe they were analyzed with the best analysis in the world, but it's still not going to prove anything if the data were inadequate to begin with. So I think just the more you know about science, the more you are more skeptical. But I think that's what science is all about, right? That is the underlying... That's the underlying thing, nullius in verba. Don't take anyone's word for it. Go and look at the data yourself and make sure that if you're a scientist making claims, that you allow people to see the data for themselves in order to be skeptical of your results.
And I think there's this problem that people want clarity.
Yeah.
They prefer the clear result. They don't like ambiguity. We know this, that ambiguity actually causes us some discomfort.
Yeah.
Physical discomfort, mental discomfort. We don't like ambiguity. We like clarity.
They want exactly transparency, so that should be transparent.
Oh, please go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Now, I want to second Stuart on what he said. So, when a paper goes to a journal or peer-reviewed journal, so it's just like maybe reviewed by 2 or 3 sometimes, but they do not actually analyze the data. I agree that we need to get the data and look deeper. But do you think that people have time to do again the analysis and the data, or check some data that it's not them who collected the data?
Yeah.
So,
well, that's the problem is that there's just so much science, and hardly anyone has the time to check it.
Yeah.
And maybe the answer to that is that we should be doing a bit less science, and we should only be, But the problem is that but that's the problem. We want loads of results. We want the answers right now and really quickly, and we're pressured to produce them too by our universities.
Yeah. But maybe there should be some interaction between the reviewers and the authors. I don't know. It's not available, this option.
Very tricky.
Yeah, let's actually do a kind of verbal interaction to verify things if they don't want really to look at it deeply.
I would complement what you have just mentioned and Stuart mentioned. In the review process as editor for 6 Springer Verlag volumes, at the beginning in 2015, when we were reviewing papers, we didn't have any access to data. We were just reviewing based on what should be the expected outcome of these algorithms, which are tested, and then they provide statistical results of that.
Yes.
Now, starting with 2017, if I remember well, Nature, Springer Verlag, all major publishing house, they changed the process. So now the reviewers, they need to have access to the data which was tested, the implementation of the algorithms which was provided, of course other IP laws. So nothing should be disclosed or used in another environment than the testing environment. It is not the case for all publishing houses, and it is really difficult if we have HPC, high-performance computing, which is tested on huge amounts of data or on data which comes continuously. replicating this kind of process, it's not physically possible outside the environment if we are talking about the CERN results, isn't it? Or the Atomic Energy Commission results. We can't easily replicate that process, but we can at least have a first check that will satisfy part of your unfaith on data. We can at least check that the data is present. But I do agree that the process is not complete and is far from being complete. Yeah. Having access to the data, we do not know if it is relevant for the entire population or if that data was not filtered with known biases or in order to achieve a good statistical result. That's
but I think there's a problem here for, we assume that other people are going to be checking our data. Other people are going to be checking our analysis. But scientists themselves can do a lot more work and ask basic questions like, what would prove me wrong? I have a hypothesis. Yeah. I've found a proof of the hypothesis. I found something which looks like it persuades it, but how might that be wrong? How might I be incorrect? One of the great scientists of all time is Charles Darwin, who worried for years about what could prove his theories wrong. And his book is full of examples of him thinking about this, sometimes for years before he published. How could I be wrong? What would it take to prove me wrong before he published? And we don't have that kind of rigor. We expect other people to do it for us, but we don't have that rigor ourselves to question ourselves and say, how might I be incorrect?
But isn't it knowledge a continuum? So what we have now as a new research results, it will become deprecated when a new researcher will have a finding which will demonstrate we are wrong, or it will improve what we have discovered. So we should think, and this is not only about data science and knowledge, we should think, how do we maintain the systems that we are developing based on the data? How do we maintain our knowledge and our systems relevant? Not only how to build, crunch data and provide a result for now. How do we maintain it relevant, and how do you de-risk it? Because we have some societal risks which are also at stake. The implications of artificial intelligence as approximation algorithms, they are stochastic methods coming from fuzzy, coming from machine learning, neural networks, symbolics, and so on. There is no one class, but we all agree, because we have NP hardness, which is non-polynomially solvable problems, Gary Johnson, so nothing new, 70s. We all agree that we are approximating to the best extent that we can with the brute force which is enabled by the computational power we have nowadays, and we try to achieve convergence. So we try to achieve best compromise solutions, not like in the old times we were just testing one solution after the other and we're comparing, and we leave convergence with time. We are just doing brute force, convergence in depth. We're testing thousands of solutions in parallel, and this allows us to be more efficient in terms of time, but not more efficient in terms of data or in our faith. How do we build our trust?
I think there are things we can do to improve the systems that we have. So, after that hydroxychloroquine thing, the Lancet decided, and this is one of the best medical journals in the world, right? You'd think this would be, they decided, and this is in 2020, they said, we're going to make sure that at least one reviewer, when there's a big data set in the paper, that at least one reviewer knows how to do big data analysis. You weren't doing that before? You weren't doing that before 2020? But that's, I think loads of our systems, even though we kind of think, oh, well, scientists are, at the cutting edge, a lot of our systems still need reform and need just extra, I was talking yesterday about top-down and bottom-up ways to change science. Yeah. Just need extra top-down rules that come in, like, if there's a paper on this subject, we'll get someone who knows about this subject to review it. An incredible thing that you would have to admit in 2020 that you weren't already doing. But so I think it just shows that even at the very top, there are these changes you could make that would boost our ability to trust the institutions that we have.
Yeah. Well, it might be especially at the very top.
Yeah, possibly,
It may well be that there's a kind of arrogance or laziness that kind of comes in at the top level.
And a lot of pressure, again, to get the results out and get the, they're the big things that need to be done right now, so, we can't spend too much time reviewing them. We need to get them out to the world, and, and that's when you get sloppiness.
Back to Emilia's point, she said now, like Springer, request the data. Yes, many journals do that, but I don't think actually they do, again, the analysis. They ask you for the data or to make it public, etc., but we never, we have never seen that really they do the analysis. Yeah. I want to ask a question, because you are expert in the AI, artificial intelligence. Would it be a solution, for example, to use like AI or robots to do again the analysis or of this data to see if there is some conflicting results or?
I would think, as we're speaking about artificial intelligence as the large umbrella of all these techniques, which are approximation techniques. So we put in an audit process, isn't it? It's a tech audit. Artificial intelligence is a technology. So we'd like to check this software technology, if you would like to simplify it. We would like to test it with something which is approximate. We need still human intelligence. Why we need that? That we need to interpret what these approximate results mean. What is the accuracy? We can have a number for this accuracy, isn't it? We can have a confidence level, but is it that sufficient? And this question is currently debated in the standardization. We have since 2017 at the international level, ISO and IEC, Joint Technical Committee 1, Subcommittee 42, which is artificial intelligence, and which is providing standards. What is artificial intelligence? So it was debated since 2017, and we published a technical report. I say that, but this is all the delegates all over the world. And then we had how we'll test, as responsible for artificial intelligence conformity assessment, which has certification. Certification means testing the systems and putting a sample and putting a certificate on that. How do we test these systems? Can we use artificial intelligence? So we are still debating, and we are working inside the European and Senelec Joint Technical Committee 21 on a technical report in understanding the challenges of using artificial intelligence for testing other artificial intelligence systems, and is it the right way to do it? How do we put semantics? And there are many open questions. They are not answered by their research questions also.
Because the problem actually, you mentioned, Stuart, that now Harvard asks like at least one reviewer to check or to do again the analysis, but we do not have time. So I receive sometimes like papers to review, but I don't feel that I will do again the analysis. It's like it will take your time. People, when they collect data, they analyze, etc. It takes them a couple of months to do that. So you want me to do it in 1 day or 2 days? That would not be possible. This is why maybe an AI solution, at least, like to give us like a sense of the accuracy of the results or of the data. If there is something alarming, could reveal, maybe we can benefit or check it further.
I don't think we necessarily need AI. Scientists can. Oh. Can I? Yeah.
Yes.
Scientists can ensure the computational reproducibility of their papers, right? So there are ways now that scientists can post their data online, all the data that they use to analyze, to run an experiment, that they collected in an experiment, and then all the code that they used, all their statistical analysis code, and they can post it online in such a way that anyone, without any background knowledge of the statistics, could press the button and make the code work. So at least you get to that point. Now, it might be the wrong analysis, or you need to check it and so on. But often the first step is just not being able to get the same results, even with the same analysis. So there's this idea of reproducibility. Like, can I take your code and your data and get the same results that you got? And often the answer is no, because on the way to do the experiment, you've changed a few things here and there, and you've forgotten to note them down, and you've dropped a few people out here, and you've changed a couple of numbers, and I added a correction to this, and there's all sorts of like subjective things that come into it. But then it should be on you as the scientist, or the researcher, or the data scientist, whoever's doing it, to make sure your analysis is computationally reproducible, and then reviewers, and post it online somewhere, reviewers can come along and run the whole thing again, and now it is possible to do that. One of my PhD students is doing that for her paper that she's working on right now. You can go onto her lovely website. She's got it all set up, nice graphs, nice code, everything all written, with notes to explain what she did at every step of the analysis. It's beautiful. That's how all research should be done, and it's going to make it a heck of a lot easier for the reviewers when we submit the paper to check that what she claims in the paper is actually what her results showed.
Yes. Donald was right. Data does create conversations.
Indeed.
I think we should do like a webinar series on data. But let's take some questions from the audience.
If they have any.
I have got many myself, but...
There's one there. One there.
Anyone? Oh, yes, here. We need the mic, please.
counts.
Hi, assalamu alaikum. I'm Dr. Zamr Al-Mana. Actually, thank you for the insightful session. I would like to share something important about this lesson learned from Saudi Arabia, because Saudi Arabia was one of the successful countries, facing the pandemic of Corona, and that was based on information, actually, and data in the GIS system, because they managed the quarantine system through the data and where is the infection. If in the partial quarantine, it's sometimes in specific sectors or district in some cities, while the rest of cities they are free to act. That was amazing experience. My question actually it's about it's clearly creating the data and having the data scattered. It doesn't give it that meaningful, which is, as the doctor said already, about the ontology, which is labeling data with meaningful labels that making it interconnected. So sharing data with each other, making the collaborative connection between multiple datas, it's making it more and more valuable. The problem is, what's the best model, economical model, that make the data, people or organization, sharing the data freely, making the open data system more real, more instant, to make this kind of, let's say, computed decisions or instant decisions, or at least a capability of instant decisions. Thank you.
You'd like to take? Emilia, yes.
Thank you for these important insights and also the question. Sharing data, once we build value and once we build for an economical, we are taking now the case where we are an economical actor, and that data has some costs in order to be produced and then to be transformed into knowledge. So of course, building this process, data to knowledge, should be strategically driven by the business priorities. We should not do it because we would like to see some application inside our company. We should do it if it has a value added and it has a return on investment, because you lose trust of all the company if not. Then when we have meaningful data, if it has a competitive advantage, that will be always a challenge to share it. Maybe you'll share it with similar actors, which are your collaborators, your partners in your business field. And in Europe, we could see the European data spaces on some specific industries, so that actors, they can get together and they can build meaningful data, shared costs, and then they will have access to those data, which are passing from data to knowledge. Some areas, they are easier to be tackled. For example, compliance. If we speak about the financial sector and if we speak about anti-money laundering, this is a cost. So sharing data is a need, because only from your perspective, you would not see the loops of financial data and you will not see the money laundering. So you need to have this collective knowledge. And of course, on these activities which are perceived as cost, compliance, regulatory constraints, there you will have data sharing. On business, it will be based on the return on investment that will be given for sharing. There is an incentive sharing data from business for the public interest. So for example, in the pandemic, the economical actors, they wanted to contribute because the well-being of the society is the well-being of the entire value chain, including the stakeholders which have their business in the area. So they wanted to contribute to the public interest, but there was no sharing instrument. So then what happened in the European data strategy, it was the appearance of smart contracts. That's one example. And maybe you also have examples of tools that ensure trustworthiness, or the colleagues, they have that. That's my perspective.
What do you mean with a smart contract?
Please use the mic.
What do you mean with a smart contract? It has two meanings. Either it's agile, so it's like showing some flexibility, or is it a smart contract blockchain, something related to that?
Yeah. So the framework, the European strategy provides only the framework, what we should do, but not the technicality of it. The technicality comes from the technical experts, which are either defining that for standards, or there are high-level expert groups which will define how smart contracts, they should be pragmatically implemented in practice.
So it
So now
has
in the
some
framework-
flexibility and agility.
It can be that, so at this moment, because the Data Governance Act and the Data Act, they are ongoing, so they are ongoing discussions, they are not final legal frameworks, it can have different forms. All that you mentioned, they are on the table for the moment.
Okay.
Did it answer your question?
But sometimes also sharing data can create a concern. So there is a kind like a privacy issue, and depends on what group you are actually performing your analysis. And sometimes they do not share data on vulnerable groups, etc. Depending on what you are doing, it's not easy to to make it public.
Yes. We have 5 more minutes. I'm going to take 2 more questions, and then we can have a round of answers. Dr. Elsa, please.
Yeah, hello. Thank you for your insightful intervention. I just want to raise the point of ethics in research. When you're talking about reviewing papers, reviewing data, the reviewer, if he doesn't have time to review the data properly and give insights about the rightfulness of the analysis or the collection of data, if there's any errors, so there's responsibility. When we talk about data, when we talk about knowledge and dissemination of knowledge, there's responsibility about the one who's working on any topic, and here there's ethics. So ethics in research is very important, especially that we're responsible towards the society and the community we're living in, and the information we're relying more. Not information, I would say knowledge, because knowledge is information with reflection from us. As people, as researchers, we're working on the topics. Just I want to see the ethics here, where does it play a certain role?
But I don't know so far if actually data can be shared with reviewers. The journals, they do not send. They send it to reviewers now to
Yes.
Some do, some don't.
Yes,
Some.
for computer science journals. And
Yeah. Okay.
Can we just have another question?
Thank you for such a fruitful discussion. My name is Elias Hariz. I'm an academic advisor for research and publishing and research methodology. I wanted just to add a comment on the doctor point regarding ethics, which is the right question that we would like to ask is, what's the part of the academic integrity, ethics and policies regarding the data? Then I wanted just to add a question regarding the reviewing articles by doctors or by researchers or by specialists. We come to a point is that if we have the proper data tracking, which is the referencing to start a research, which is a very highlighted point where a reviewer should tackle before they start or making that article available as an academic content or presented to the public or to any research or journals publishing. So the main question that we may ask here, how, or we can say, what's the percentage of trust that we may give to researchers when it comes back to the resourcing or to the referencing that they are based their research on? Here it will open for us the brackets to doubt even about the resources that was used for that article that will be published in the future. Thank you.
That's a great question. Can I jump in?
Yes, yes,
It's
please.
a great question because I actually saw someone discuss this the other day. That wouldn't it be great if we had a situation where we could even look back through the references of someone's journal article or book or whatever report, and check if those references even still say the things that they were cited for in the first place, because maybe sometimes those references have been retracted from the literature, or sometimes something come along to show that that reference was actually incorrect or fraudulent or whatever. There's small moves in this direction. So I use software called Zotero. It's free software to add citations and references to, to a Word document or whatever, and I'm writing a paper. And it has a list of papers that you've put in as your citations, and it highlights them as red if they've been retracted from the literature, right? So it's a citation manager, but it highlights them red, so you don't make the mistake of citing a paper that's actually been, withdrawn from the literature, which happens all the time. People do it because they just don't check and so on. So, with the right simple software tricks, I think you can help people, move realize what's trustworthy and what's untrustworthy in the previous literature. So there are some things which we can change. And again, just like I was saying before, all it will take is just to be, have a little bit less inertia and just move beyond the old models of doing stuff and be a little bit less stuck in our ways. And one answer on the ethics and peer review, maybe we should pay peer reviewers. At the moment, they're asked to do it out of the goodness of their hearts for free while they're doing their other full-time job. Maybe we should give them some money to do it and actually make them get them to do it properly. That would be one thing that might improve the ethics rather than the slightly unethical situation of piling more work on someone and then expecting them to be the arbiter of rigor in the scientific system, which is quite a big task when you're asking someone to just do it for free.
Yeah.
Or maybe we could have, like, other than paying them to review, maybe we could have another incentive, maybe something like the publishing record, the reviewing record, or something.
Yeah, I mean there are some things online where people have attempted to do that. I think you would have to build that into the universities, right? So universities could, when considering someone's promotion, or not just universities, but also or
kind of service,
hiring them. It's a type of service, and actually really emphasize this service that they've done, and
Okay.
as part of the
Before we continue, I just need to take one last question.
Hello, everyone. My name is Saijan, and I'm the founder of the Lakes Preservation Project, which is based actually on research, Save Lake Balkhash International Project. Thank you all for giving this opportunity to ask this question. It is, again, related to ethics in science. We all understand that now, especially in pandemic conditions, there is a huge link between business and science. And dear distinguished panelists, could you please give your personalized opinion on what is the best mean to manage competition between researchers and scientists with regards to gaining financial funding? Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we can extrapolate from the first question, which was on ethics, and also how you can make value out of the data. Because we spoke about one process, which is the review process. But we are reviewing all data which is produced by the machines, and we are building information, and then we are building knowledge, and we are using it for resilience, isn't it? How do we put ethics? There was, and there is an interesting work done by Virginia Dignum at the University of Umeå, which simplifies the process of ethics. What are ethics? We have our own values, each of us as individuals, for our education, for our background, for our family background. We build values. Then based on geographical regions, we agree with those, and we put it as norms. And then we interpret those norms, how we put rules. We trust each other, but we still have laws, isn't it? So laws, what they are? They are the transposure of norms into functionalities. And then we have legislation based on those functionalities. We were mentioning about scientists, and you were mentioning about the collaboration between the private and public sector, and how can we trust each other? There is a problem of vocabulary, of course, and we use different terms in order to specify processes. For example, in business, we'll speak about processes. In research, we'll speak about an interesting finding, an interesting research. We'll not think about the process that will lead us to a result. We'll just think, this is the problem, and I'm tackling. I don't know how I will tackle it, because if it was known, somebody else would have done it. So it is not a known process, so we treat a lot of unknowns. Tech transfer is, of course, a difficult question, but all stakeholders, they need to collaborate in order that we have the same vocabulary, the same understanding of the notions that we are using, and we are able then to share data, because we trust what we share and we understand what we share. We fear what we don't understand. So tech transfer, of course, from academia to industry, it is a challenge, because there are different paths perceived in our education. Researchers, they were perceived in some of the cultures as being the result of a PhD program, and that's the only path. But that's culturally not generally valid, and it depends on our understanding, on our values, on our norms, and our functionalities. So once we have a common understanding of what we want to achieve with those data, and we build a trust environment, I think there are no breaks or no, let's put it, there is no need for bridges other than the conversational ones. Because once we engage in a conversation, we start to understand each other's opinion.
Yeah. Just I would like to mention something regarding the ethics. We should look also at the quality of the journal where we want to publish. And I think the editor, when sends to reviewers, it sends to some people that are expert in the field, and we should give them like some trust. Okay, I don't think that someone expert in the field and already published top quality papers will be unethical. Maximum, if doesn't want, will reject or will decline to review a paper. But I don't think we'll review it like just to review. Or maybe sometimes they reject the paper because they do not have time. They reject the paper, and this is like an unfair decision sometimes for authors.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmad. Donald, do you have anything to add?
I think when I hear about academic publishing like this, and I'm primarily working in the business world rather than the academic world, it strikes me that academic publishing is often a very one-way process. It's about publishing the results of something. In fact, people always talk about that, the results of research. And in the business world, there are no results. It's just an ongoing process. You're always doing more and always doing more, and there's no point at which you can say you stop. And yet in academic publishing, it's always leading up to publication, leading up to doing something like that. And we talk about it as results, rather than the beginning of a conversation, rather than the beginning of something. In fact, if something turns out to be wrong, you retract it. And it's as if this thing is meant to be perfect, and if it's not perfect, we'll take it away. Yeah. And in the business world, it's not like that. You know, you put a product out, if it doesn't work, well, you build another product. And it's a very different attitude. And I think there's I like your idea that, you know, it brings together eventually a conversation between these things, because I think the academic world actually has a lot of conversations, but the end result is meant to be perfect. And I think we should actually accept that most of the things aren't perfect.
Yeah.
Most of the businesses that are run out in the world are very, very imperfect, but they get by. And there's this gradual incremental progress that we make. And I think this is, I don't think it's necessarily healthier than the academic world, but it's very different. And I think many of the things that we see going wrong in the academic world could learn from the business world and become more about a struggle, a continuing struggle to be better, rather than searching for the perfect publication, rather than searching for the perfect result.
Yeah, I would just add one point, one last point, quickly. Yes, the academia actually is a slow process. And sometimes when you submit a paper to publish, it takes like 1 or 2 years. And at that time, maybe your results are outdated. So this is why business solutions are faster. And sometimes they can really come up with a solution better than academia in some cases. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Before I conclude, I just want to say that in my introduction, I did not do Dr. Stewart justice. I forgot to mention that he is also a magician.
I'm able to do one magic trick, which I did earlier on. Can I just make one final point, because you asked about publishing? Is that okay?
Super final point.
Yeah. Sorry, you asked about funding. And here's something to look into. The most ethical way to fund people is by lottery. Right? Make sure that people's propositions and proposals for grants come up to a certain standard, and then randomly assign the funding. That's the most ethical way to do it. I'm not going to go into all the details, but that's my answer to that question. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Emilia, Donald, Ahmad, and Stuart. I hate to end this session, but let's keep the conversation going outside the Knowledge Summit. And thank you so much, everyone, and thank you so much also to our online audience and to our interpreters. Thank you.